Hello, everyone, and welcome back to River City Girls. We're finally going to be on our way to the. Oh, that must have hurt.
That's a fantastic way to start the segment.
The environmental hazards are another thing that gets amped up in River City too.
Yes.
I started just like one of the first things that I did when I unlocked Pruvy was just using her boombox to knock people into the electric floor outside of her boss arena over and over, just for the hell of it. And yeah, I'm not sure why that felt like something that I wanted to do, but hell, I needed to grind, so I could unlock some moves for her and stuff. Seemed like a good place.
Good family fun there.
Yeah.
So obviously this game offers a lot of replayability. I mean, there is a New Game Plus mode, but how do you keep that balance going so that people can still come back and replay it all the time, besides just, all the money that needs to be earned? How do you still keep that core loop enjoyable?
Yeah, we were really surprised on this one, and I think a lot of it is, I think it's just kind of firing on all cylinders as far as the potential of a WayForward game. So, the combat is satisfying. It's balanced in a way where you're probably not going to unlock all your attacks and all your boosts and all that stuff for a while, especially with some of the more expensive items. And then, I think people really dug the story and the characters and the humor and definitely Megan's music. So I was really surprised that, because normally with our games, we release them and then you see a lot of interest for a short period on, Twitch and YouTube, and then it kind of tapers off. But this game, even though it came out 3 years ago, pretty much the entirety of those 3 years between River City Girls 1 and 2, every single day we would see people playing it on Twitch. And, a lot of them are going through the first time ever and just hearing about it word of mouth. But a lot of them, like some of our fans, are just like really mastering combos and, figuring out how to get the most, kind of juggly, endless combos out of the game as possible. And that's also something that, factored into part 2. We saw, people love to kind of practice with that sort of stuff. In fact, there's kind of one room in the last world where it's just like a typical hotel room, but I guess like with the enemies that come in, that's sort of like okay, if you're going to practice your juggling, go here. They did that so often that we actually created specific circumstances for that in the second game. So you've got the punching bag at the beginning, and then you've got the dojo cat guy at the beginning that you can kind of wail on endlessly. But yeah, I think it's just, if I had to guess, it's like, I think it's a mix of people dig these characters. We had some incredible voice actors, the visual design, like some of the best artists we've ever worked with, and then the fact that there's just that degree of depth that if you want to, be unlocking and mastering new moves for weeks to months, of most of the WayForward games, this is the series to go with.
Speaking of whaling, we are about to approach Noize here.
Oh.
And there's the burn-off vanish.
Yeah.
Okay. So, of all the bosses in this game, Noize was the one who gave me the most trouble. But I also got her down in one try, because by this point in the game I was kind of over leveled. So I had a lot of trouble dodging her attacks, but I also survived all of them. So that was something. But I really like this character. Like, I really do. I also like the twist that she was kind of Kyoko's best friend for about a month before Kyoko got expelled over something stupid.
Yes, in the most Kyoko way. And this is one of the few totally from scratch characters too. So we created Noize. She's not based on anybody else from the River City series. Same with Hibari. She was an all original boss. And then most of the characters that you encounter, I'd say probably at least 75%, maybe even more, are based on some Double Dragon or River City character. But this was just us saying, again, looking at like thematically, we want to have a fashion boss, we want to have in the second game a food boss, we want to have a social media boss, we want to have a music boss. And so there really wasn't like a clear template for like a rock star with the existing characters, so that's why we just made her up. And yeah, she's one of my favorites too.
How did you gain permission to integrate Hibari and Noize into the Kunio-kun world?
ARC was pretty open to that. So they basically said, here's your, here's your brand, do whatever you want. Our initial pitch to them was just really focused on Misako, Kyoko, and then Ricky and Kunio. Those are the only 4 that we did the concepts for early on. But they let us know that anything that they got in that Technos acquisition, we would be able to use. There were just certain rules. So I know we had to do some revisions like, okay, we got the school wrong that somebody went to, or hey, this is a slightly different timeline, so we have to change this or this, but kind of like from like the different realities and stuff. But they were on board from it at the beginning, and then yeah, basically the way it works is just, this is a game that we're co-developing, but ultimately it's their IP, and so everything that we come up with folds back into that. So in theory, I don't think we've seen it yet, but in theory you can expect that maybe Noize and Habari and some of those WayForward created characters could appear in future games that we're not even doing, just even like the Japanese ones or the Arc ones, because they're all being folded into that universe now that Arc will own all those characters.
This, this is probably simultaneously the dumbest and most heartwarming sequence of events in this entire game. Just because, like, by the end of this, it kind of feels like Noize has made peace with the 2 of them in her weird way. But also, like, this is all happening on stage during one of her concerts. So, oops.
I don't think Dinglebutt is entirely happy with us right now.
Oh, she's not. But you do briefly see her in the second game. So, well, it was a little awkward in my case because I decided to start River City 2 with Kunio and Ricky. So they were kind of talking like they knew her. But oops.
Yeah, that's another one of those things where it's kind of baby steps. So like in the first game, we couldn't do dynamic story at all. So again, part of that was because we actually unlocked adding Ricky and Kunio to the game was pretty late in development, relatively, so we didn't have an opportunity to rework the story. So it's kind of awkward. You basically play as the boys and you hear the girls. In the sequel, we were able to do that, but just because there was such a massive story, I think it's like 3 or 4 times as much dialogue as the first game, they're largely kind of all saying the same jokes and making the same points and stuff like that. I think that would be the next evolution. If we do a third one, I think we would build it in a way that you have more satisfying, meaningful changes in the dialogue based on who you're playing as and really tailoring it to them. That's something that we've definitely heard from feedback from players that they want to see like unique dialogue when Marion encounters Skullmageddon again and stuff like that. So that's definitely an area where we can keep improving.
Yeah, I'm definitely hoping for that in the future, but I don't know Kunio and Ricky well enough to know what their personality should be like. The only thing that struck me as odd was that because they were reading basically the same lines as Misako and Kyoko, they kind of talked like they were the ones doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
It was funny. But
it's tricky. Yeah, we would what we did is we would start with the same lines and then I would tweak them wherever it was like factually necessary. So for example, when there's a lot of lines that say like, oh, you pesky teenagers, and Marion is not a teenager, she's in her 20s, so she would say, I'm not a teenager. Or you have specific characters referring to themselves, they'll have a different reaction. It gets way more complicated too, because you can play as Pruvy and Marion, but you can also fight Pruvy and Marion, and you can go through a game plus and fight Pruvy and Marion as Pruvy and Marion. So it gets very complicated with the story stuff and how that all overlaps. But yeah, in general, like the way that we did it is the game logic starts thinking that you are Misako and Kyoko as the main story people, and then as you select other characters, that it forces them out of it essentially. And the way that we handled it, I think at first the first move is it replaces Misako, because most of Misako's lines re-recorded by the other characters with some slight tweaks makes a little more sense. Kyoko is such an oddball character that anything, all of her nonsense seems a little bit goofy, even more so than usual, coming from Ricky or Kunio or stuff. So that was the order of replacements.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that I learned when I was playing River City 2 was Ricky in the second player slot with Kunio in the first player slot just didn't sound right.
Yeah.
So eventually I switched over to Ricky and put Kyoko back in the player 2 slot, and it actually did work out fairly naturally that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely something we can improve on with future ones. We did one where we actually did a little bit more of that was in our Aliens game on Nintendo DS, Aliens Infestation. On that one, you can play as 20 different Marines, and we rewrote every single line of the script for them. But the reason that was possible is there's no VO in the game, so it's just purely a text game. If that had been the case here, we could have done that. But once you incorporate VO, and then also this game, the sequel had dual VO, so now we're recording it in English and Japanese. It just becomes trickier and trickier depending on the workload.
Oh, did the Japanese version of River City Girls 1 not have Japanese VO?
Yep. Yeah, that's correct. We talked about it with Ark and just never really came together. So the first time we did it was on River City 0, just on those little bookend cutscenes before and after the game. Those have the Japanese actors or the English actors, and then with this one we got to do full 100% VO in Japanese and English on the second game.
That's interesting. I would have thought like Japanese VO would have probably been like a requirement for a game that's based on a Japanese property, but I guess that doesn't always work out.
They were interested and we wanted it to happen. I think it was just practicality in that it was developed by WayForward. We did the bulk of development, and so they had to essentially wait until all of our VO was done before we could have even explored the possibility of recording Japanese VO. And again, on this game, we were kind of figuring it out as we went along. With the second one, it was much more easy to predict because we'd already been through this once before almost identically. So luckily with the second game, they were able to do the full VO and the casting and everything on their end.
Okay, yeah. It's just sometimes things fall together in a way that kind of surprises me. Also, that kind of points to Arc System Works being like pretty flexible, because I can see other companies like being pretty insistent about including Japanese voiceover as a main feature. But
yeah, they've been pretty accommodating in that, in the regard to features and stuff like that.
Kyoko, you keep taking dives into the bay. What are you doing?
But I like to swim with the fishes. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, and ultimately that was more their call, just because we can implement it, we have to code it, but they're the ones that do all the recording and the casting and all that. So if they had actually put it together on the first game, we would have put it in. But it just seemed like with just the schedule and everything, it wasn't in the cards.
Yeah. Okay. I understand that.
Before we get too away from the Noize boss battle, as a rhythm gamer, I appreciate that you had a boss based off of it, but as someone who plays rhythm games a lot, it is so hard to want to dodge the notes.
That's true. I never thought about that, yeah.
Well, I played Crash Bandicoot 4, so this ain't my first rodeo.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to ask about that a little bit. Was that a particularly hard thing to implement for the game, considering it's a beat 'em up, or was that, fairly easy to kind of just have stuff sliding down the vertical lines of the screen?
It definitely, whenever you do rhythm-based stuff and you're tapping into the audio, it's easy to get it functioning, and it's more challenging to have it perfect. So, it was a lot of like tinkering to make sure that it matched the player's expectations in terms of what you're actually hitting on the songs and syncing up with it. And I remember, we had our audio designer, Kevin, really worked closely with Megan, the composer for the game, and also she sang vocals on all the Noize songs, including the boss battle. And I remember there was a lot of back and forth between them and working with Bannon to really get all of that perfect in sync. Because what you don't want is if it's just slightly off, you don't want some situation where they're playing by ear and then they're constantly hitting the things. You want it to be as fair as an actual rhythm game. And that, but I think in the end it's relatively fair. You just have to kind of, keep an eye out for the big empty spaces and make a leap at them. Definitely, if anybody's struggling with it, a tip is go to the bottom of the screen, don't go to the top. Give yourself as much reaction time to the notes traveling down as possible.
Yeah, definitely. But you want to keep that drop shadow at least a little bit in view, though. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a little sweet spot down there.
Of course, Hasabe and Mami are just sunbathing, or so they claim, outside of the Yakuza headquarters, because that's a thing normal people totally do. For a while, I thought maybe these two were the ones who sent that stupid photograph. But my suspicion has shifted since then to Dumpster Boy.
I think it was officially confirmed by this point that Godai, let's just say, had a lot of influence over the game's plot.
Yeah, we actually we mentioned publicly that it was Godai. It was actually from a cut ending. We were going to have one more little button at the end of the game where after you complete everything, the girls were going to say like, whoever sent that photo, and then it kind of cuts to him in his creepy room, and it pans out, and he's just got photos of everybody and the very weird stalkery kind of style, and he's like this kind of Machiavellian like guy behind everything. It was just one more thing that we weren't able to get to, but that was the original ideas. There was ultimately an explanation of it, and it was Godai that sent it basically to just stir up trouble, and he's probably just bored of the humdrum day-to-day high school life.
Oh, okay. Because what set me off was his final side quest is he says there are these 5 Yakuza guys inside the tower who have turned informant. Go make them regret that choice. I'm like, wait, why would you care? Why would you make what? Are you secretly like the Yakuza boss's son or something?
Yeah, those are just kind of happy accidents. The Godai quests came together pretty late. We worked, Jacksepticeye does his voice, and we worked with him on those. And I remember us adding them after the story was all complete. So they're really just kind of random stuff. It's just like, oh, go do this, go do that, just go do a bunch of stuff. But it is funny that, if you factor them into the plot, they're getting more and more dark and mastermindy, and it kind of goes from like, oh, get me a burger, I'm hungry, to like, take down the Yakuza, they've betrayed us, sort of a thing. But not much thought given to them other than like, trying to come up with some good gameplay variety.
And I thought Yamada was one of the darker characters. What is Godai doing?
And I'm just like, okay, all right. This is getting a little out of control, Godai. And it was around that time that my brain, my slow brain finally clicked and realized his name is Godai, which is not a positive name at all.
Well, it actually depends, perhaps, if you are referring to the Japanese pronunciation. So, if we take go, 5, and dai, which is big, 5 big, go big, maybe Godai is going big on...
What? No, I'm just saying... His name sounds like Godai.
I know, but in Japanese, the symbol dai, it means big. Like, there's a song in Dance Dance Revolution called Daiken Kai, which means big opinion. It's...
Oh, okay. I mean...
So, I thought it was maybe Godai was just, while being a creep, maybe he was just being a big creep about it.
Okay.
He is a big creep. There's not much question about that.
Is Godai an original, or is he from something?
He is super established. So if they ever have like a dozen Kunio-kun characters in any game, you can always spot him. And it's funny because it's always the NES style. Like, they look very similar because they're all just like these single color, 2-color 8-bit heads. But you can always tell Godai because he's the only one with beady little pupils. So if you ever see a Kunio character in the old games where he just has a single dot for the pupils, that's Godai.
Oh. Sounds like they were trying to make him creepy. Yeah, I can see him hanging out in dumpsters. Okay.
Well, now we are actually in the Yakuza Tower, where we are now dealing with literally evil Ryus that managed to throw Kamehameha Hadokens at us.
I like how the Yakuza enemy type is held off on right until the end of the game in this one. But in River City 2, they come at you right from the beginning. I actually had a heart attack the first time I saw one of these guys. Thankfully, they're not as obnoxious with the Hadokens at the beginning of River City 2. I think they might use it more often as you go on, but these guys can really mess up your day.
Yeah, and we also evolved them a little bit between the games. Most of the enemies get a little bit of a refresher on their attack moves and their rosters and stuff, so they're doing some different stuff. And yeah, the male Yakuza, it's actually one of the few characters that I voiced in the game. I do not voice in games, but like I mentioned, we needed to do a bunch of enemy stuff, so I did him, and I did Trash, the guy with the sledgehammer, and I think somebody else.
Oh.
So if you hear any deep-throated Yakuza, kind of grumbly Japanese going on with those characters, that's me.
Now, the female Yakuza in particular is a really good recruit, I found, because it shoots out 3 knives, and if you're and it comes out pretty fast too. So if you're precise enough, it can be actually kind of a boss buster. Just like 3 knives right in their face, all dealing damage at once. It's pretty devastating, especially if you're doing a combo at the same time.
Yeah, we really tried to vary each of the recruits as much as possible in play style, kind of to accommodate everything the player would want to do. I really like using the thugs, the pompadour guys that you meet in the high school, just because they're a really good, reliable jump in, quick kick, and kind of, keep the action going. But then some of the other characters, like I know a lot of players will enjoy using Linda, the whip-wielding enemy from Double Dragon, because she has a little bit of like a launcher in her attack, and that helps them kind of keep an enemy airborne when they're trying to chain a bunch of stuff together.
She has a surprising amount of range, but the most useful thing about Linda, I think, is that she kind of has a 2-step attack. She'll attack straight with her whip, and then she'll do a sort of backswing that catches that tends to catch stuff she misses the first time. And I found it's really good for crowd control as long as you can position her correctly so that she doesn't get hit before she hits them. Ooh.
Yeah, we kind of missed the hammer swing there.
The hammer guy, once he gets going, can be really dangerous.
Oh yeah. And it's all about, complimenting them. So, I mean, Trash, that's his name. He's from Combat Tribes. Really slowly kind of builds up his attack and then just becomes this kind of wrecking crew. That's something that once you're dealing with much faster enemies running all over the place, kind of throws you off. Because you don't want to have, I'm fighting everybody just very, spry and quick. You want to mix it up with slower enemies, mix it up between enemies that are aggressively targeting you versus ones that are kind of hanging back. And as long as you get as much variety as possible, then they all complement each other.
Now, this is more of a fridge logic moment on my part, but I have to question, why are there so many students in this Yakuza tower? It's starting to look like Misako and Kyoko being here isn't such an odd event after all.
It's a very good point.
Finals are hard.
You can make up your own lore. The boring answer is just trying to come up with the best variety of enemies to plow through. But yeah, I don't have any fun lore to explain why they're here.
Yeah, I figured.
Finals could be difficult. Maybe it's an intern As far as I'm aware, not all Yakuza do the stereotypical Yakuza thing. It's not my place to judge.
Yeah, we do get a little bit in the second one, River City 2. We do draw a more direct line between the Yakuza and the rival students. So maybe this is kind of like a little bit of a hint or a precursor to what's explained more in part 2.
Although, talking about, like, the stereotypical Yakuza thing, this entire concept, Sabuko, with her army of, you know, all-inclusive Yakuza thugs, that's just, like, the most non-Yakuza thing ever. Because the Yakuza is not exactly, you know, equal opportunity. You're not gonna see, like, female Yakuza thugs. That's just not a thing that happens. Sabuko would not exist. Although, I have to admire the ego it must have taken for Sabu to have a daughter, and not only make that daughter, like, the second in command of his organization, but to just name his name with a feminine ending to it. Like, this is my Ultraverse version. And
Yeah,
I don't know.
He's a pretty progressive warlord, I guess. Yeah, crime lord.
Progressive and, you know, just a really big head. Really, really big ego.
I mean, he's got 25 statues of himself just spread across the town. So.
Yeah, that, and it's better to at least have a daughter named after you rather than, say, going back to the Crash 4 reference earlier, encountering your literal female counterpart and, well, I will let that implication speak for itself.
Yeah, that's probably, like, the one character in video games who has a bigger ego than Sabu. Oh, no.
Thankfully, we don't have to be here, so.
We knew that we didn't want to bring Ken in yet. We knew we wanted to keep Ken, his son, adopted son, for the sequel, so that's why we created Sabuko for this one.
Yeah, but just enough build up to Sabu in the story and in the statues to have his figure looming over the story anyway.
Yeah, exactly.